Greetings, everyone. Hope everybody is doing wonderful. I'm Uncle D coming to you. Haven't come live in a while, but we want to give you an update on a couple of things that are very important. And there's a lot going on, but particularly want to talk today from basically two posts that I've done recently. But the topic today is really discussing the bloated defense budget and the fight for disability rights. Um, it's only two different things, but they're all connected, and I want to give an update on it with everything that's going on. I hope you're following me. This is Uncle D. For those that are watching me on YouTube, you can go to Evolving with Uncle D. Subscribe, hit the bell, and you can follow me. And then if also you're on my social media, you can find me at Uncle Devin Show. But today we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of things that we discussed, especially, um, I mean, I don't know about you, but I know I have family and friends and a number of different people that are really going through a lot right now, especially those that are federal government employees. But whether you are or not, it all has an impact. I'm an artist. I can talk all day on how the impact of a lot of the decisions that are being made by 45, 47 is impacting all of us, and from a musical standpoint. But today I wanted to just go back and just kind of clarify a few points related to the United States defense budget, and make sure that we put it in proper perspective, because this is not something new that's going on. What we see happening is something, to be honest, that is a dual party problem, and something that could have been dealt with a long time ago. But I'm going to deal with it from a different perspective. Many times you may have a lot of people who discuss a lot of different things that's going on, but may not also talk about the work that they've been doing. I can say that 31 years ago, I actually started my social activism in the Black church, talking about how we needed to speak out against the bloated defense budgets and the bloated defense money that was being put into the Defense Department. And I did this back then. In fact, I have a book right here, and inside this book is called An Appeal to the African Church in America: Beware of False Prophets. And I wasn't talking about people. I was talking about money. I was talking about capitalism, and I was talking about the fact that we have a rich tradition for those who grew up in the Christian faith, to be anti-capitalist, because that the love of money it was the root to all evil. We talked about all of that. And so I actually wrote a paper back in, and I guess this was back sometime in 1993 or 1994, and I submitted it to over 25 AME Zion churches within the Washington district of the AME Zion Church. It was entitled An Open Letter to the AME Zion Church: Join the Anti-Repressionist Movement. Now, the anti-repressionist movement was a program of action implemented by an organization that I helped to found back in 91, I believe it was 92, called the Pan-African Student Youth Movement. And it was the movement, the actual anti-repressionist movement, was a coalition of different organizations who, in one form or another, are organized toward eliminating one or all of the arms of the military industrial intelligence police complex, taking it from our rich civil rights history. You see, we many times in our own community, we only focus on a certain aspect of our history. You know, when it comes to civil rights, people say the first thing they want to talk about is just voting. When we talk about civil rights, the only thing they want to talk about is some of the basic things that we talk about that really support more of the liberal processes. But the fight against the U.S. military and the use of all this money going into the military versus going into social programs is part and parcel of our struggle. You got to go back to Dr. Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, when they stood up against the Vietnam War, and when Dr. King called the United States the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, saying that any country that spends more money on its military than it does on social programs will die a spiritual death. Well, you see what's happening right now. But we also have to go back to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, when they did not only just come out against the military, they said, hell no, we won't go, and fought against the draft. But right now they've quietly implemented the draft again with the support of both the Democrats and the Republicans. But we're talking about right now over $820 billion that a joint Congress and both Republican and Democratic presidents have just blindly given to the Defense Department. And as I mentioned in one of my posts, for the 7th year in a row, they have not been able to pass an audit. They cannot account for over 60% of their funds. I mean, I think their overall assets are somewhere around $4.1 trillion, and they can't figure out where half of that money is. So let's take a look at it. We don't have plants in our community. We're not making guns. We're not shooting. I mean, we're not building bullets. But yet in our community, we're riddled with all of this. They call us criminals, but we're not making all of that. And how do we not know if they don't know where the rest of their assets are going? How do they not know that this is not intentionally being pushed in our community to continue to cause our destruction? And so right now, I know that the Congress has recently, the Republican House budget resolution, where they're trying to eliminate, they say, close to $880 billion in Medicaid cuts. So let's take a look at that. Overall, Medicaid may receive, I think, $625 billion from the federal government. The states put in the rest, about $260 billion themselves. So when you add it all up somewhere, if I get the right numbers, it's no more. It's no more about $880 billion a year for Medicaid. The U.S. military gets more than that, okay, in and of itself. And while Trump is saying that he's trying to cut the military budget by 8% for the next 5 years, don't get it twisted. They are trying to reallocate that money to other, and they were very clear with that, to reallocate it to other war objectives that he has. And so I began protesting to the church back 32 years ago, saying we have to speak out against this. And my concern is that we got too comfortable. As a community, we've allowed ourselves to get rich off the nectar of capitalism, and we've turned our backs on so many people. We've allowed ourselves to be disconnected from our African cultures. I one of the things that I mentioned in my book, and the reason why I call it an appeal to the African church in America, because at least in the AME Zion Church, the A stood for African, but quite honestly, we had no real connection to Mother Africa. We didn't have any connections there at all. And that was intentional. And it's always been intentional, because the only way that a small group of European nations, including the United States, can, I guess the only way that they can be in control and stay in control is if they divide and conquer. And so I remember W.E.B. Du Bois wrote something in 1955 in the National Guardian. And I mean, he spoke about it very clearly, about this whole thing about the American dream. And many people fell for the American dream. And you see what's happening now. They canceling, I mean, cutting shows, anything to deal with us. The real America is being exposed right now. And this is a wake-up call that I think that can help us to get to a different space if we're willing to be truly objective and not just simply cow back toward the Democratic Party or the Republican parties. Both of them are our enemies when it comes to this. But something that W.B. Du Bois said in 1955, he says that one of the curious results of a current fear and hysteria is the breaking of ties between Africa and American Negroes. when we think of the hell which Irish Americans have given Ireland, and how Scandinavia, Italy, Germany, Poland, and China have been aided by their immigrants in the United States, it is tragic that that American Negroes today are not only doing little to help Africa in its hour of supreme need, but have no way of really knowing what's happening in Africa. It is fair to admit that most American Negroes, even those of intelligence and church, do not yet fully realize that they are being bribed to trade equal status in the United States for the slavery of the majority of men. And now that equal status is in question, because they're cutting back all these different strides that we made as communities, fighting, going way back to the Civil War, going back to the over 400 slave revolts and rebellions that took place, and always finding different ways to gut out the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Even though the 13th Amendment never got rid of slavery, you go back and look at it, you'll see that. But we now see that they're now being even more aggressive, and still increasing more funds into the military. So what I said back in 94, I sent this statement to all these churches. And in fact, I opened up and says that there is only one purpose for weapons, and that is to kill. The United States is the world's leader in the sale and manufacturing of weapons, representing 57% of the world's market. That was in 1990. It might be a little bit different. I keep seeing that it dropped maybe to about 40% now. I'll have to check that. But it says today, the United States and its military industrial intelligence police complex is stationed in every continent throughout the world. And of course, I talked about my song, Move the Money, where I talked about that they're in over 80 countries, and over 800 military bases around the world. Who are you? What are you absolutely doing in all these different places in the world? Now, just imagine, can you imagine any other country having a military base anywhere in the United States? Can you imagine Argentina or I don't know, France or someone having a military base saying that they're here to protect their interests? So you can imagine what's going on there, and we know with the history of what's been going on with all of this. So and back then, I was just appealing and saying that we have to speak out against this. One, because it's part of our civil rights history, and it was part of our way of connecting the civil rights movement to the human rights movement. So we still see this is going on. And what I would suggest for anyone that is still concerned with this, now is not the time to say feel overwhelmed and you don't know what to do. There's something very simple to do, just some basic steps, just to make you feel better. Write a letter to your representatives first and foremost. Just write a letter to them, letting them know that you disapprove this. Let them know that their vote, your vote, is tied to making sure that these things are changed. The other thing that you can do is what I've been doing, and what we have to do internally. We have to look at our internal organizations and say that we have not done enough. I mean, for 20 something years before I actually left the church, I was leading a social movement there, or at least I was doing my best to raise these issues in the very organization that I used to belong to in the AME Zion Church. You can do the same thing. You don't have stop waiting on the pastor to make the decision. The majority of the people of the church are the power, not the ministers. The ministers may have a certain knowledge of biblical studies, but it's only the people, the everyday people, that makes the difference. And so you all need to come together in your churches. You need to come together in your fraternities and sororities. We need to do more than what we've been doing. You can figure out how you can pull these things together. I'm just, I'm curious to know how and can any organization support the amount of money that's going into to the military versus social programs. Look at what's going on in our community, and it's in the basis is it's our tax dollars. When you take a look at it, this is our money. They play the games and we pay the bills. And so when we focus on that, and I will be posting a copy of my appeal to the church I wrote it, like I say, back in, I guess I can say 1994. And I was very clear, and I gave very specific examples of how the military industrial intelligence police complex was sabotaging many of our movements. Du Bois said that many times we weren't there for at Africa's need. During the liberation struggle, the United States military was there fighting against it. Keep in mind, it was the United States and Israel and the white South Africans that was in Azania, South Africa, that was leading apartheid. Okay, we got to understand that. We got to understand that in Ghana, it was the CIA in 1966 that overthrew the democratically elected government of Ghana. We have to understand that it was the United States that led to the assassination and the coup in Congo of Patrice Lumumba, and we can't divorce ourselves from those things. Now, we can come back and make it even and focus a little bit more on the second part of what I said I was going to discuss, and that is the whole thing about disability rights. I did a post recently about Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and I was focusing on a recent case, Texas versus Becerra. I believe it's called Becerra, and in that post I mentioned that at issue was two things. One, 17 red states were challenging a Biden update to Section 504, which he did I think in May of 2024, where they were including something called gender dysphoria. And Biden was indicating his support of a federal court ruling that said that gender dysphoria can be considered a disability. Now, gender dysphoria means someone feels the body that they were born into doesn't reflect their true self and who they are or identify with in terms of their gender. So as a result of that mismatch of what they were born as and what they perceive themselves to be, the scientific community, the medical community, at least part of the medical community, said that this can be considered a disability because it can create anxiety, depression, and it can lead to a limit of one or more of major life functions. So we have that issue of dysphoria, and those 17 states were really arguing against that. But what they submitted to the court, they were saying that they were asking the court to get rid of the entire 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which means it would get rid of all of the disabilities for 504 basically says that if you receive federal financial if you receive any type of federal financial assistance, that you cannot discriminate against anyone who is disabled. Therefore, this impacts anybody that has a physical or a mental disability, someone, especially those who need interpreters or those who are in wheelchairs or, and you can ask for accommodations and all those types of things. And so their ruling, the 17 states, was asking the court to get rid of all of that. But I did just recently find out that I believe they submitted information to say that they were asking for a clarity. It says here that the status report filed, I think it was on last Wednesday, they clarified their intent. They said the plaintiffs clarified that they have never moved and do not plan to move the court to declare or enjoin Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, 29 USC Section 794, as unconstitutional on its face. Plaintiffs have not sought and do not seek to enjoin the disbursement of funds from the department on the basis that the statute is unconstitutional. So basically what they're saying is that wasn't their argument. What their argument was that they were asking the court to find the updates made by the Biden administration last year that happened to have language focusing on gender dysphoria as unconstitutional. Now, to be honest, I read that in some of the state's attorneys' reports. Many of them were saying that they're not against Section 504. They're just against this whole issue of gender dysphoria. That is a different issue. Now, I believe that I believe today, no, sorry, February 25th is the day that the court is receiving amicus briefs from all the parties about this. I do believe that the court will recognize that that was the true intent and will throw out the suggestion that the entire Section 504 will be thrown out and will then only narrowly focus on the particular issue of gender dysphoria, which is a whole nother issue that we can talk about. I did find something, there are many different disabilities that are named as such. Some may say, well, why does it even matter if why and how someone it becomes disabled? Why is that even an issue? um and why would anyone even need to disclose it? If your doctor says that you have anxiety and you have depression and any of those things, then is it even necessary to yeah is it even necessary to even share what it is? But it is necessary for people to share what their disability is if they're asking for an accommodation, and there are many different accommodations. Now, I've investigated several accommodation complaints over my 27 years as an EEO investigator, and it can be pretty challenging sometimes. I mean, I've had one case where someone filed a complaint because they're disabled based upon being allergic to certain scents. That the slightest scent will really, really cause them much physical discomfort. And in this one case, it seemed like and one of the ways that the company tried to mitigate that was to ask certain people not to wear certain perfumes. It got even to the point where some people, they asked them not to try to wear odorless deodorant. Um, and it could be very contentious issues, but those are certain things that the Rehabilitation Act tries to help with. Try to find accommodations, try to find reasonable accommodations for those who have physical or mental disabilities. Those who have ADHD it can be a potential disability, but you would have to expose that and share that. So I believe in this instance, those who have gender dysphoria will have to um, expose their or at least let the company know what their actual disability is, only in those cases in which they are seeking a disability. And um, so I'm glad to hear that. I wanted to give an update to that because that's very important. That it looks like, and we don't know what the court will ultimately do, but it looks like the whole issue of Section 504, um, with the 17 states clarifying that they're not trying to get rid of the entire Section 504, but only the aspect of it that focuses on dysphoria. And let me just mention this: there's a I'm just learning about this. To be honest, I didn't understand. I didn't know what either one of these terms were until this case came about. But you have something called dysphoria and something called dysmorphia. And I mentioned that gender dysphoria means that someone feels the body that they were born into doesn't reflect their true self or who they are or the identity in terms of their gender. But there's something called body dysmorphia. It's a disorder that results in someone perceiving a major flaw or problem with their own body, even if that perception is not based in reality. They see themselves or a certain aspect of themselves as distorted or ugly. Um, and I began doing some other research about this, and I realized that this was something that was classified as that could potentially be a disability way back in 1987, but it was first diagnosed, I think, in 1891 by a German scientist, and I'm trying to see if I can find their name. I may have gone past it, but I had never heard of that before. But again, there are many different aspects that can be considered disability, and so body dysphoria, and they also call it body dysphoric disorder, also referred to as body dysmorphia, is a mental health condition. Is best described as an anxiety disorder, specifically a type of obsessive compulsive disorder involving a belief that a certain body part or physical appearance is defective or wrong. A key to understanding what having a distorted body image can feel like is realizing that there's a fundamental disconnect between reality and perception for those suffering from body dysmorphia. Understanding BDD can help with learning how to deal with it. So I only mention that because that's an example that the courts have actually clarified and said that it can be considered a disability. It could be. It's not just because you have it doesn't mean it's a disability, but someone can claim that to be a disability. And so the argument now is that there's those in the medical community that has considered gender dysphoria as a disability. And now we have 17 states that are against that. So I only bring that up in case people are having discussions and arguments about it. The fact that there have been similar types of discussions, or at least situations that have led to people claiming disability, and it makes for a good conversation. So it looks like right now, Section 504, I believe that the courts will probably dismiss the initial request to get rid of all of 504, but will only focus on that one aspect of it about gender dysphoria. But I'd love to hear your take on this. What are your thoughts about any of all that? It's important that in this particular day and time, as people are trying to figure out what to do, you're going to have to do something. Um, the anxiety that people feel and the hysteria and all that. Quite honestly, I know myself and many others who have been fighting in the struggle for 30 something years. We've always felt this. My entire adult life has been a sense of urgency. And I feared that where we are now was going to eventually happen. Didn't know when, didn't know how. But if you understand politics, and if you understand just, as a political science major, you look at trends, you look at how things are done. Capitalism can only get to where we are now. Everybody on this call may have played the game Monopoly. And the way that the rules are set up, one person can own and control the entire board, while the majority of people are beholden to that one person or that small group that own the board. And everyone else becomes poor. Everyone else, every time you land on someone else's property, you go to jail. You can't afford your utilities, all those types of things. This is what the game is all about. And I've been part of a movement for my entire adult life, trying to raise these issues in a community that have become so relaxed and so I guess happy. Maybe our bellies have been too full, and something that we might need to take a look at. So let's see. Okay, and I see someone said they disagree with a lot of things. I like watching you for different perspectives and have a change of mind on several occasions. Having said that, your fit is okay. I don't know what that means, but okay. But I'm glad you're sticking around too. But let me just say this: I'm never opposed to anyone who has a different position following. That's what this is all about. I never say that I have all the answers, but I have a perspective based upon my years of organizing, my years of experience, and my years of study that I would love to be able to do so. So someone says, I always assume gender dysphoria or body dysmorphia were the same thing. Do they often overlap, or is there a correlation? Well, let me just say this, and thank you, Oak, for sharing that. What I just read, and be honest, I'm learning it just with you. It says here that from what I can see, they can have some similarities, and I'll just put I'll put this article. I think I should be able to put it in the chat, or have someone put it in the chat, so that you can take a look at what I found. But I'm just learning that they're slightly different, but there are some differences with that. So, but I'm too learning a lot about that. But thank you so much for even sticking around, and please share with me where we disagree, because I would love to hear your perspective as well. Um, And so anyway, that's just a couple of updates I want to give, because I know I've done a couple of posts both on the military industrial police complex and on Section 504, and to do my due diligence, I want to make sure that I at least keep us up to date on those types of things. I want to give a shout out to my friend, I think it was Jabali Africa, said, thank you for sharing the facts. Black history is American history. Hey, we've got a lot more work to do. We have way more in common than we certainly have differences. I always tell people, when they ask me where I'm from, I say, well, I'm from the African tribe in America. And my Jabali Africa is from the African tribe in Kenya. We have African tribes in Jamaica and in Cuba and in Europe and different places in the world. That's how I look at us. Because no matter where you look in the world, people of African descent are amongst the poorest people everywhere in the world, are among the poorest people. But yet we come from a land that is the richest in the world. And so my whole life is designed around changing this contradiction. How do we change that contradiction? And that's part of why we do what I'm doing right now. So thank you, brother Jabali Africa. I mean, I don't know if that's Josek or Juice, but either way, y'all are family, and I really appreciate you all. But other than that, let me know if you have any comments or questions. I'm submitting my information to my local shadow senators. I'm in Washington D.C. We don't have we don't have any elected officials, but I'm submitting my information. I've already submit letters to them telling them to um, vote down these budgets that continue to put more and more money into a military system that does nothing but kill and overthrow other countries. And let's put that money where it belongs, and that's into social programs. And so one of the things that you can write specifically is identify your congressperson. Okay, start there. You with your congressperson. Also, write the president. Continue to write now. We know, he's on a whole different level, but you can still. I think it's just a good exercise to get it in official documentation. So first of all, identify your local congressman and U.S. senator. Okay. Also, don't overlook your local politicians on the state level and on your city level or county level. I recently submitted a proposal to my councilwoman, Jamise Lewis George, here in Ward 4. And as we focus on the fact that we still are struggling with healthcare in our community, I submitted to her a project that I started on my own when I was, back in 2006. I didn't start it, but I started with others, called the People Before Profit Community Healthcare Project, where we took the medicine in our own hands. And this was a project that was inspired by and predicated on the Cuban healthcare system, the excellent Cuban healthcare system, where we worked with medical students at Howard University, and we earmarked a 5-block radius around this one particular church in Northeast DC, in far Northeast DC. And we went door to door, and it was a beautiful scene. And you can go to peoplebeforeprofit.org. You can see some information that we did with that. I'm gonna do a special series just on this, but we went door to door with medical students in their white coats, and just checking on people's health care and passing out information. And we were using it also to raise the issue of why we still need a public hospital in DC. It was a movement. We had a music entertainment part of it, where we were using music and the arts to advocate for what we were looking for. And so I recently sent it to my councilwoman and said that I think that we should enact something like that here in Ward 4. These are small things that you can do, and you don't have to recreate the wheel. You can take these. The reason why I repost things that I've been doing over the last 30 years is so that other people can see it. And you don't have to accept everything from it. Take what you think, take the best parts of it, throw what you think is not good, and create something on your own and find a solution. Just like you will find a solution if something was wrong in your house. You wouldn't wait for someone outside to come and tell you what to do in your house. You'll figure it out for you and your family. Well, likewise, we need to do that right now. Contact your local representatives. Ask them specifically what their position is, on any of these issues. Have your local or state representatives put out an initiative to say that we are against the United States putting 800, close to $1 trillion into the U.S. military, especially when they cannot even account for this money. Over 60% of it, they can't even account for. So these are certain specific things that you can do. You can also follow me on uh, Evolving with Uncle D on YouTube, where we will continue to give more specific steps that you can take. Small steps. I mean, I know it's a big issue, but small steps, a lot of us taking small steps can really make a difference. I'll also say that find an organization that represents one or more of the ideas that you may have. And keep in mind, no organization is going to be perfect. But you can find an organization that is already doing something around that, and then lend your time, because time is most important that you can have to be able to contribute to it. But if you can't even if you don't have as much time, then find ways to maybe financially support them. There's so many different things that you can do, but right now, I mean, playtime is really, really over, and we really have to do more to be able to make a difference. And so I will just say that it's important for us to take a stand, to do something. And again, I've been fighting this myself. Like I said, I did this in 1993, so we're talking 22 years ago that I submitted this to the church, and I continued to submit it to them in many different forms, in many different ways. But I've also submitted it to my elected officials. I submitted it to other organizations, and I'm still willing to commit my time to bring these things about. So thank you all so much. I'm not going to take too much more time, but I hope that this can be helpful. And again, a quick update. You can, I still say that each one of us need to raise the banner and say no more of our money need to be spent. Um, um, you know, Definitely $800 billion should not be spent into the military. This should be lopsided. We should have far more money going into social programs, because no other country comes close, not even laughable close, to the amount of money we spend on weapons. And so the argument that, well, we got to do this to protect our interests, don't even believe that, because no other country, even everyone else is spending their money on social programs and going into space and all these other things, whereas here we're focusing on other stuff that we really don't have had. The priorities are not where they need to be. So anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you so much, everyone. See you all again real soon. And if you have any questions, let me know. And as I always say, just remember that life is a drum, so beat it.